Recording. So we're just going to start the learning session now, and we're recording this for everyone who can't make it in the room today. So our first guest speakers is the Ethnic Community Council.
Yeah. Before I start, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owner of the land we are meeting on and pay my respect to Aboriginal elders past and present. My name is Mariette and this is Christine. We both work with the Ethnic Community Council. Anyone heard of our organization or worked with our organization? So I'd like you to endorse whatever I say then. We run many, actually our organization, I've got flyers here if anyone interested to take one. We started in 1975. Our board members do advocacy for CALD communities and they promote multicultural Australia. Christine and I, we don't do any like politics. What we do, we run many projects. We've got project on health, aged care, community service, environment, tenancy, work cover, and mainly environmental project. And today we're going to talk about the waste side of it. With waste education, we run waste management, waste reduction, recycling, and resources recovery. And all our projects are actually aimed to the CALD community. Our core business would be CALD community. So how do we engage with our community?
How do you go to the next page, Jenny?
Oh, you should just be able to click the button.
Click on the black bit, perhaps. Yeah, all black.
No? Or yeah.
Oh, okay. So as I said, our core business is CALD community. How do we engage with CALD community? Through community group, existing group, religious group, Saturday school, mothers group, seniors group, CALD organization. Most CALD organizations are members of the ECC, because the ECC is sort of the peak body of CALD communities. And the local council, when we work with you as well. To give you an idea about our project, Sustainable Living Project, this project actually was funded by OEH and established environmental education at the ECC and established our great team of educators. The subject they are recycling, composting, waste minimization, low food hate waste, energy saving, water saving, biodiversity, and sustainable gardening. Actually, with this, we started with stormwater pollution, and then we concentrated on composting and recycling and waste minimization. And then when we had the drought, so we talked a lot about saving water. And then when we had the energy prices high, we talked about energy. And I feel now we're going back to waste. Waste is the subject. So every era has its time, depending on what's happening. So I could tell that now there is lots about waste. So waste becoming an issue, like a priority. And then household chemical, which is funded by New South Wales EPA. With this project, what we do, we raise awareness of how to dispose household chemical safely. We promote the clean-out service as well as community recycling centres. We're running this for the 5th round. So we're doing workshops, we're doing events, and we're doing media. So we're touching on every aspect that might connect with the CALD communities. Then we've got cultural connection for sustainability with Korangai Council. So a couple of years ago, Korangai Council approached us because they had many people from a Chinese background and Korean background moving to the area. So they wanted to connect with the new residents. So they asked us to run a project. So we run a project which has 2 components: community education and business education. So with the community education, we run edible garden, household chemical. We run home assessment on energy and water and bushwalk with the ranger. And this was for Cantonese, Mandarin, and Korean. And for the business component, that was a waste energy assessment for 20 businesses. And the same for CALD businesses run by Mandarin, Cantonese, and Korean. Next is waste project with Parramatta Council. Anyone here with Parramatta Council? No. Yeah. So we run this project for Parramatta Council for the Arabic and Mandarin. That was mainly about waste reduction and littering. If we look back at the Ku-ring-gai Council, and we look here, you could tell that both are, although they both about waste and both connected to the CALD community, both are different. So our project are catered to the need of the council. Like, for example, the council had big issue with littering and with illegal dumping. So our project, waste project, had lots of emphasis on that. While if we go to Ku-ring-gai Council wanted to introduce biodiversity was a big thing. That's why they had they want to introduce people to their bushland in their national park. I remember a couple of years ago when Canterbury Council was introducing the yellow bin, they had a big problem with contamination. So when we run recycling for the group in this area, mainly in KMC, we talked actually about what not to put in the yellow bin, but the one to put on the yellow bin. So all our project catered to the what issue in the council and what they like to deliver to the CALD communities.
Oh, okay. That's you. Hi, I'm looking after the bin train project. We have been successful in all rounds, all 3 rounds of bin train program. And that was one of the case study selected by EPA New South Wales. So what we do is we are the only grantee engaging with not just CALD communities, CALD businesses, but hard to reach businesses may have language barriers and cultural barriers. So we pretty much cold calling them, and we visit areas with highly populated ethnic background businesses like Bankstown, Liverpool, Fairfield, Cabramatta, and so on. We not only working with individual business, but we try to work with buildings, shopping malls with pretty much 90 to 100% ethnic background business owners to change the whole waste system in the building. So we have about 10 different languages for bin train program. These are the languages we're focusing on. And they are well-trained bilingual / multilingual assessors. And so bin train 1, we targeted 132 businesses and 543 tons were diverted. And bin train 2, 301 businesses were targeted and 1,244 tons were diverted. And the current one, which is bin train 3, the last one, we are reaching 240 businesses and we are targeting 992 tons to be diverted. And we're also involved in low food hate waste, again, EPA. So we engaging with those participants in CALD communities to how to reduce food waste at household, not business, but at household. And they have developed smart kit, it's called Food Smart Kit, and along with the kit, coupled with ECC's trained bilingual educators, we deliver information on how to reduce household food waste. And 180 households across Sydney will be targeted in the following languages.
We've got other...
So just before you go on, we just had a question asking, with the bin train, can you tell us a bit about what type of businesses were involved in the key waste streams you were looking at?
Mainly food-related business. So we don't approach those small offices with hardly, there's not much waste generating. So food waste, grocery shops, seafood, butchers, some warehouses. Yes.
And with the program, do you work with councils?
Yes,
on
sometimes.
That?
Yes. Strathfield councils, Ryde councils. Anyone from Ryde? Oh, Oh, yeah, yes, we do. And Fairfield Council. Yeah.
And when you work with the council, kind of, what's the approach that you take?
Well, mainly if they have services for commercials, not everyone does, but some. So we match them together and we introduce the services, and they try to add communal bins through the council services. That's the main.
Other projects we have with councils, this is sort of fee for service. So we run, we work with like council or other organization within 2 times. First, a project. If you have a like allocated fund to run a project, we'll run a project for 6 months, 1 year. Otherwise, we run what's called fee for service, where you really need us to attend 1 event or 1 workshop or run a mini workshop for them. So those are sort of fee for service. So we've done Cumberland Waste Education for Arabic, Vietnamese, and Turkish and Mandarin. As well, in January, we're running another LITA campaign at Holroyd Park for Cumberland Council. We work with WSROC, and we delivered in languages on left food, hate waste, recycling and waste minimization, Arabic, Mandarin, Vietnamese and Korean. We work with WSROC on LITA campaign on cigarettes butts in Blacktown, Fairfield and Auburn, mainly for Arabic speakers, as well as North Rock, where we campaign on LITA reduction in Eastwood Mall for Mandarin, Cantonese and Korean language. Our team, we have 23 like multilingual educators trained in waste minimization, community and business, love food, hate waste, water and energy saving. The languages they are Arabic, Mandarin, Cantonese, Vietnamese, Korean, Greek, Hindi, Pakistani, which is Urdu, Nepalese, Tamil, Italian, Spanish, Assyrian and Turkish. That's our team. What we offer differently than anyone, we speak the language, we understand the culture of people that we are working with, we know what to say, how to say it, and how to engage the ethnic community. Because culture is not only language, it's more than that, it's what to say, when to say it, and how to say it. And we provide as well like a translated material. I'll give you an example from other work than ECC. I used to work in a women refuge where we had a couple of women from Arabic background. Those women were speaking, because they were born here, they were speaking very well. English was not a problem, so we have no language barrier. But they couldn't work with their caseworkers. They come to me and said, oh, my caseworker doesn't like me. Simply because although the caseworker does her best to be able to work with the client, there were the cultural and there were no cultural harmony between these two. So the client wanted the caseworker to show more emotional involvement, and the worker wasn't. So that was sort of cultural thing. Although you try to work very hard into the but engagement has to be not only language but only cultural. The way you say it, what to say, thing, and how to bring some people over. So that's what I would like to emphasize here. That's not only we do languages, but we do cultural as well. The last one, and this is like just to show off or how many people we reach each yearly around the 5,000 to 8,000 within community and our business work, like both, because we do business project and we do community project. So both is around 5,000 to 8,000 yearly. It's mostly CALD communities. That's about it. That's about it. Yeah.
Are there any questions?
Yeah. So when you work alongside other councils, you said you did allocated projects.
Yeah.
So with those allocated projects, so how would you put forward propositions to councils on what kind of work you want to do with that particular community, or do you seek that feedback from council?
Yeah.
How does that?
Actually, the council approach us usually, like for example, they have a problem, say, with illegal dumping. So we meet together and we try to work out the best way we'll be able to approach the community. We together we work on a sort of a plan, and then after this we get the educators and we train them within the plan. what they need to do, and then we'll send them out to deliver the plan. So we work with the council depending on the issue, but the council usually the drive of what issue is there, because I believe different councils have different issue in their local area. So that's what we do. It's like working together to get the best results.
Fantastic.
Yeah, a couple of years back, Strasbourg Council had lots of problem in Homebush West area with illegal dumping, littering, waste and everything. So they approached us and we had to knock on about 1,600 households at night when people are there. We didn't get kicked out, luckily, and to reduce, to educate them and to reduce waste in that area. So that was challenging, but we did it till the end. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I have a question. Do you work mainly in Sydney, or do you do regionally? And this is particularly coming from someone, Vanessa, who is in Queanbeyan, Parang, so right down.
Actually, for waste education, we do Sydney and Illawarra. We've got other project which is called Speak My Language, which is HK. We do it's nationally. We do we work at the ACT. Yeah.
But not at this stage.
Not at this stage with the waste education. Not really. That would be the far we go. It's Wollongong and Illawarra.
We go as far as Central Coast. Not much Newcastle, but up the Central Coast. Maybe a few Illawarra.
Any other questions?
So, like in some of the pictures you had workshops, do you do the advertising to get the people to the workshops, or do you tap into like existing groups?
We do both actually. We do we tap into the existing group because we know who's we've been working with this existing group for a while, as well as we try to draw a flyer because not everyone is a part of a social group. So we don't want to deny other people the information. So we do as well like a flyer. We do advertisement on our website. Yeah, so we're trying, and our network. If you got something coming up, we send it to our network as well.
I just have a really quick question. This is Dale, by the way. Fantastic work. I just wanted to see, so if you're doing a program where you go into a shopping centre, say, and you're talking to all the businesses, do you have incorporated at all any sort of, I guess, not reporting, but just a way to let council know that you've done, such a amazing piece of work in their local governing area, just so that they're across that as well? Or is that not sort of typically built in, I guess?
Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we work with the council from the beginning. Like last year, we worked with Willoughby Council to work in shopping centres in Chatswood area. So we worked through together. So I didn't have to necessarily report everything. So they were involved in. Sometimes we don't report to the local. That's a good idea that they might be interested in what was the benefit and what was the result based in that area.
Yeah, definitely. I think also just from the perspective of any potential double up, if they're trying to run a education campaign, but then they're doubling up with you, and just in case there's any sort of, not conflict, but I guess double up of resources. I'm sure they'd, want to be involved. But just curious.
I can imagine we've got a shopping centre that we've been having a bit of trouble with lately. We've been working quite closely with, who might be quite useful for us to be talking to you at the same time, actually. So, cool. Any other questions on that? Fantastic. Thank you both very much. Rachel, EnviroCom case study. Over to you.
So the mouse. Thank you.
So, as I mentioned, I work for EnviroCom. We design and deliver waste education and behaviour change programs on behalf of councils, as well as waste audits and training programs. And one in particular we wanted to mention was engaging and delivering some CALD workshops through a pre-established language school. So the background to this is we have an education contract with Liverpool City Council. We have a member from Liverpool City Council here today, but it was Sarah that we worked in partnership to deliver these workshops. So they're quite a significant CALD population, so they're about 40% born overseas, 50% speak languages other than English, and the main language groups are Arabic, Vietnamese, Hindi and Italian. So in discussions with Sarah, where they wanted to engage deliver some CALD workshops and try and seek these through pre-established networks. As discussed by you guys, that there's a lot of things to consider, and particularly if you can be a visitor within an environment they're already comfortable within, it's far more comfortable for them. So sort of reducing that comfort by viewing us as authority figures, as sometimes CALD workshops do associate council as. So it was MTC Australia who responded to an expression of interest that was circulated by council. So they run a wide range of training and specialised programs around, vet courses and language groups and all sorts of various programs, starting your own business, things like that. And it was the Language Centre that responded to council's expression of interest. And some of the advantages here with that was that we'd have, a captive audience, so they're required to be in class, so that's always good. None of that 50% dropout rate on the day, and it's a great opportunity for the institution to introduce the attendees to a range of vocabulary, some new words they may not have come across yet, and it's the opportunity that they can access information they might otherwise miss out on. There's letterbox drops and various other mediums that's put out there for the community, but I suppose if members of a community are already feeling a little or less inclusive with the wider community, then they may not have access to that information. And we did find that with a lot of the new migrants that we spoke with, and in speaking to the ladies that were coordinating the centre, that they do have a strong desire to learn the new social norms of their new country. So it's an opportunity for them to access another aspect of that. So there's only been 2 days that we've delivered workshops on thus far, and in the 2017-18 financial year, one at the end of last year and one sort of earlier this year. So the way that they have their classes organised is when there's a large sort of constituent of one particular language. They had lumped them in together, and these are usually newer migrants as well. So there was Arabic groups, Vietnamese groups, and then they had the intermediate English speakers, which were a bit of a mixed bag, so a bit of everyone. And so translators were provided for those larger groups that were, unilingual, I guess, the Arabic and Vietnamese, and there wasn't a translator provided for those mixed groups. And in 2 days worth of workshops, that was 195 attendees, which we were really, really thrilled with. So this is only a very brief presentation, by the way, and it's more, I suppose, an opportunity to kind of ask what everyone else's experience has been. And I have a question for you guys towards the end as well to see what your experience has been. And this would probably be really useful for you in terms of collateral. So just a couple of things from, upon reflection of those 2 days worth of workshops that we delivered, was that we provided giveaways, and we all know everybody loves a giveaway, and particularly something that's functional and useful. We all love mini bins, but I can't imagine how many of them are in landfill in just pieces. So we provided these recycling crates. This is an example of one that we had for Burwood City Council, but the ones handed out in Liverpool did have Liverpool branding. And the attendees absolutely loved those. When we ran out of those, we had also just the core flute recycling boxes that we provided as well, as part of the encouragement to avoid using a plastic liner in recycling. It was an opportunity to disseminate translated materials. So we had, all of the waste brochures and the CRC flyers and things like that in a couple of those key languages that we were able to provide to people. And we got some great feedback from both of the translators. So the gentleman who was translating for the Arabic group was sort of, I'm not sure how sort of interested they might be, but was thrilled by how interested they actually were. And again, as you said, with cultural groups, they're extremely different in terms of how you behave, how they engage, the language that's used, all of that stuff that you need to take into consideration. So then the flip side of the Vietnamese group was that the translator for that group had the expectation that they would be very shy and not ask a lot of questions. But both of them were just like, oh my gosh, we can't believe how participatory both of the groups were, and, asking heaps of questions.
So is there somebody presenting it in English and then being translated?
That's right. Yes, so I would be, so I would deliver those, and so I was presenting them. It was aided by PowerPoint, emphasis on visuals and, minimal sort of text, and then pause, and it was translated. So the translators were organised through council. Now, it was interesting because the first day we had an external, there was an external translator through council. I don't recall who it was that they used, which company they used. Maybe it was you guys. But, so we found that using the external translator, less risk of going off script. So they're obviously that's their role, and they're very good at translating quite word for word. There were occasions when there'd be a little bit of sort of clarification or whatever, but we found the first couple of translators that were external, they were very clear with communicating, oh, they're just asking this, I'm going to tell them this. Yep, great. And off it went. Then we had...
So was there any issues with the translator not understanding some of the...
No, they were really good, actually. I'm not I sort of wondered if they had, delivered content similar to this before, because they were quite good in sort of understanding the concepts. With the second day worth of workshops, it was one of the teachers who translated for the group. So the great thing about that is obviously the class was extremely comfortable with her, and that's their usual teacher. So there was a lot, probably even more questions asked, perhaps, less hesitation because they're more comfortable. But there was one occasion, this is why I said less risk of going off script, where there was a bit of back and forth and a sort of pausing, and then she said, oh, she just asked, I told her this, and yeah, it's all good. And actually, she was right. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. It was, it's more of a minor detail, but I was pleased that she did say, oh, this is what I told her, because it was incorrect. So, but it was, like I said, it was only minor details. So I guess there's benefits both ways, and this is why this is sort of one of the questions I'd like to sort of put to the group with other people's experiences with using translators, if they've used them, whether externally and what their sort of preference has been or what they've found in that respect. And a really encouraging thing is that, as we understand with sort of adult education, they don't want to just be told this is what we want you to do. They want to understand why it's important for them to do that. So there was, the great thing was there were a lot of questions about, why do we do that, or why, what about this? And it was content that was coming later in the presentation. So they were jumping the gun, which is awesome. So, very important to include that sort of stuff, lots of visuals. They loved this, that we had some visuals of, a MRF worker pulling plastics, soft plastics out of cording machinery and that sort of stuff. And it seemed to really resonate really well with them to say, oh, okay, now I get it. So with using an external partner such as this, there was quite council circulated the expression of interest to quite a number of groups, and unfortunately it was only one that responded. So obviously we'd like to engage a range, as you guys mentioned, there's community groups and there's mothers groups, and there's so many different avenues, but it was only one that actually returned, got in touch and did actually, was interested in participating on this occasion, of course. And we found repeat engagement can be a bit challenging. So the organiser at MTC is, really values the program. loved it, was thrilled with it, has said, yeah, we want you guys to come back. We love it, but, you know, they are quite limited. There's so much content they want to cover. There's so many different topics to cover, and, you know, they may be limited by staffing or program timeframes. So even if the interest is there, there's so many competing agendas at any given time. So that's obviously a challenge. And, you know, the importance of being highly visual and the consideration that perhaps there may be times when Western symbols don't translate across all cultures. And this actually came from our Melbourne team worked with the Burmese community in MUDs, and what they found was that ticks and crosses mean nothing to the Burmese community. They don't use it in that way. So, you know, we're going, yes, no, going, everybody gets it, great. and you know, obviously the feedback is they employed a Burmese gentleman as a casual to engage basically as a language consultant. So he was, you know, able to, as you said, speaking from that cultural and giving insight to the Burmese culture. And there was a lot of food waste. And as you said, it's when they you know, put on an event, it's important to have lots of leftovers because it's, you know, and it's sharing, and you know, if you have nothing left, it's like you haven't provided enough. So, you know, there's so much food waste because, but yeah, so that was a really wonderful thing. But I was wondering if there was any insight you guys could provide, especially for this gentleman designing collateral, of anything that comes to mind straight away of visual symbols or things that don't necessarily translate across. Smiley faces, sad faces.
Actually, when we run like recycling, what we do, I find it visually work with all cultures. I don't know, just like we've got a box of things that you can recycle and you can't recycle. It's interactive. Find it that's called community like like you stand there and talk to them and they wonder. So it's good to have interactive, and incentives, they're always good, like to get something out of it. It's good. And then we work actually with Navitas in Bankstown and in Fairfield and Auburn. We've done similar program. We talked about waste, one day about waste, another day we've done water on Cooks River Alliances we've got. So that was a great approach, the approach where students are, especially for people who's coming to this country, they feel like they've learned something about, they're engaging better within the community. It's a tech for them, really.
Learn from them too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially with the food hate waste. I think they've got lots of tech, like generally speaking, when we start any workshop, we try to say, well, how do you do things back home? Either water, recycling, we just really cross-learning because we don't want to come across as we know something you don't know, which is, it's really about sharing knowledge and building on it.
Louis,
and in the group, if you have out of 10 people, you'd have some people would get the message, and you can ask them to help you to disseminate the information as well. And social norm is important, but within CALD communities it's ever more important because they're here. If they're all alone, and if they see that's what their peers are, if that's the message their peers are going into, they will get to share it regularly.
Right, and all our champions.
Yeah. And generally speaking, all our workshops done by language by the person, which is really a plus. I mean, it doesn't everybody have to have it, but we're very lucky to be able to speak the language and to know the subject. So that's very, very interactive. Gets very, because usually things, when you say something, goes through translator and then the group and back to the translator, back to you. It's a bit of like not straightforward communication. I mean, you need to use them, but generally speaking, we've been very lucky to be able to run a workshop within the language and with the knowledge of the person running the workshop.
Absolutely.
Certainly. Do you know what works for the Burmese community?
Well, I was actually thinking, darn it, I didn't ask that question. I don't recall the answer to that question, but I can pass it on.
We get the same problem with taking crosses. So we have a little postcard for people to take what actions they want to do. We start seeing some people doing crosses. That's something we don't want to do. Some universal is you can just put a thumbprint onto the things that you want to do to make a personal commitment as well.
Oh, I love that idea. Yeah, that's really nice.
And the circle with the cross is more universal. No
smoking thing.
Yeah, okay.
All right. Any questions for Rachel? Okay, fantastic. Thank you. All right, so it is over to me.
I was actually provided some material by WSROC to input into this discussion. Now, I'm not from WSROC, but I've just read through it and I'm going to try and summarise it. But I did notice, I think we've got some people from Blacktown and Penrith virtually online. So please at any point, if you are familiar with any of this and you can add any greater detail, please do jump in for me. So the first thing I just wanted to share was that WSROC has actually provided a case study of a social media campaign to talk about asbestos. And I'll send this around because it's quite detailed, but it's actually got some information about how they went about developing the campaign, how they shared it out, and how they evaluated it. Like most of our efforts, the difficulty is that it's so hard to evaluate what impact a campaign had on the ultimate behaviour in terms of this. So around, I think one of them, they can measure that asbestos hotline, but you know, in terms of the ultimate outcomes, really difficult. But I'll send that round. It's basically just we did this and this is what we found. But the other thing that they've done, which is really great and available to share, is they conducted a piece of research on CALD engagement within councils within WSROC. Or they had someone do this piece of research for them. So they actually looked through what everybody in WSROC was doing. And what they found was that most councils were doing two types of things. They were either developing resources, translated, and providing them, or they were running face-to-face activities to inform and educate. And the four challenges that they found was that generally they're just not resourced well enough to do this sort of work, that often their staff don't have that deep training and knowledge of the CALD communities which they're working within, that one of the things we've already talked about, that there is sometimes a fear of authority in a number of CALD communities, but also just other tensions within a community, particularly if you're trying to do engagement within the community and using the existing networks, and generally just the rapid increase in transience of CALD populations means that, you know, they go into these communities and they do some engagement, and then within 3 to 4 months it's actually a different community, you know, in some cases. So what they found really did work well. Definitely face-to-face is the preference. Engaging community leaders and people from the thing, and as we've heard, people who are native speakers in the language, and making it fun so that people are interested in doing it. Definitely needs council support to do this. So that was one of the things that they found, that really struggled, that they might have one education officer or an education team trying to do this without the support from higher up. Really provided some challenges. So one of the things they found was that, this talking about maybe the Burmese example is, developing some resources and then finding out at the point of delivering them that ticks mean nothing if you can pre-plan and do that consultation first, way back before you start. So often the experience was people had ideas and they started doing those ideas, and then they sort of built the consultation along the way, but they'd already progressed quite far often before they'd started that consultation. And that was often because of the resource constraints. They didn't have the ability to go and do a broad piece of consultation first. So making sure that the method that you're using is tailored to each community that you're working in, which can be really difficult if you've got a diverse range of CALD communities, but the differences between CALD communities are greater than the similarities, generally speaking, just as they're different between any individual CALD community and a traditional Anglo-Western community.
Sorry, and even within the say Middle East, it's one Arabic community, but really it's different cultures altogether. So you can't assume they speak Arabic, they have another culture. So it's
that's right. Language is not the definition of a community.
Culture. No, culture is different than that.
And that idea about trialling things on a small scale and being able to adapt them. And as much as possible with the evaluation, how do you measure that the efforts that you're doing are not just having people go, yeah, this is great, but are actually making changes. And definitely a big struggle, not just for WSROC, I'm sure, but I think it's just everybody's experience, is that you do this and you have your own thoughts about what happens, and the people that you're talking to have your own thoughts about how good it is. But then you get back to, you know, your monthly meeting or your quarterly meeting with your council data, and you can't see any change in the data that comes back and what's going on there. So what they, the consultants actually made some recommendations back to WSROC, and so what WSROC has done is actually developed a series of fact sheets, and these fact sheets are going to be shared. They've kindly agreed to share them with the group, so we'll send these around. But yeah, just a few tips and tricks to based on the learnings that they had. So is there anyone on the line from WSROC who knows any more about this or has any experience with the fact sheets that wants to jump in? I'm putting you on the spot. There may be silence. I'm thinking Penrith and Blacktown, I can see you guys are on the line. No, sounds like no.
Before you go on, as an example of that, we did, before my time, so I clearly read the report, I wasn't involved in it, but we got Love Food Hate Waste money, which at the time didn't have a great deal of CALD content in it, apparently. And so we ended up putting together some focus groups for Arabic, Vietnamese, and I think Greek, mostly women, and got them to talk about, you know, what food means to them and their family, and you know, the strategies that were specifically the strategies that are in Love Food Hate Waste. So the, you know, eat leftovers, and the Arabic women were horrified at the concept of putting something in the fridge and then taking it out and eating it later. And for the Vietnamese, there was particular issues about freshness. So food has to be fresh daily. So that generates waste itself. And if you don't understand that, you go in the community and say, well, put it in Tupperware, and, you know, eat it 2 days later, the message is going to work. So in terms of what they were talking about there, worked very well. All right, do you want to talk about your research?
So moving on, so ISF has done a number of kind of literature reviews, but also developed engagement strategies for a number of councils in Sydney. And as part of this, one of the questions always is, you know, how can you help us engage CALD communities? So what I've done, because we give away our IP as part of the work that we do, what I've done is I'm just going to quickly go through some of the resources that we looked at as part of this, and there's links to here so that you can look at it in more detail. But so, oh, I thought this was the last one. Anyway, this is a case study. So the City of Monash funded through the Melbourne Metropolitan Waste Working Group or thing, which, by the way, if you're ever looking for case studies, MWRRG, whatever they are. Oh, look, it's on there. MWRRG.vic.gov.au have loads of case studies on MUDs, on CALD, on so many things. So if you're just looking for ideas, they have similar, I guess, to like the Better Waste to Recycling Fund, where people can use the, you know, state funds to do something, but they're required to provide reports, and those reports get published on this website. So great resource there. So this is one Monash did. They had two aspects to it. One was they actually did in-home visits to a group of 30 or 28 households, where they went twice during 3 months, and they provided them with a bit of a kit. So they got the bin stickers that we might be useful, an actual recycling crate, I can't spell, sorry, fridge magnets and reusable bags and containers, some of the mini bins, and also a compost or worm farm for those who are interested. So the 28 households got all of this. And then, thanks, Dale's just correcting, the Metropolitan Waste and Resource Recovery Group. And what they actually found, if you look at, just skip to the results, they actually did the before and after bin audits, and they found an average reduction of 1 kilogram in the red bin, the rubbish, and an increase of 1.6 in the recycling, but most interestingly, a 50% decrease in contamination through in-home visits. So that's, you know, that's incredible finding. They also, at the same time, they ran workshops, so they offered it to literally every CALD group in the City of Monash. They got 13 back, and I think they probably sent it out to about 60. So again, you know, talking about Rachel's experience of only having one, the response rate from organisations can be low, and they also did CALD festivals, but they didn't have any way of measuring the impact of those. But yeah, so that's got all the details in that report. We also looked at some original research that was done by the then Department of Climate Change, Environment. So they did this research of MUDs, but they looked at CALD subgroups within their sample compared to what they call non-diverse residents. So, you know, they found that it was just as important to CALD communities as it was to non-diverse, which was not very much compared to other priorities, but in its own, you know, for its own sake, obviously everybody values it, but compared to other things going on in their lives. They found that recently arrived CALD residents really did want to adopt the right practices, but either, you know, just couldn't get it or had cultural barriers and didn't feel comfortable with what they were being asked. Definitely said they want information face-to-face and in their own language. So that doesn't surprise anyone. This was, again, the Waste Metropolitan Melbourne, whatever they are, group, did a series of research and then developed a toolkit. This is online. You can get the toolkit here. The summary of the research, they actually found similar or greater commitment to recycling around the CALD groups, but the massive gap in know-how. One of the things they found, which is quite interesting, and when we talk about the diversity between cultural groups, but also within cultural groups, is that many people are coming from cultures where they have no experience of recycling. So they're coming into a space that's just completely foreign to them, and in some cases, no experience of waste management at all. And it's just really interesting because we had an experience when we introduced recycling and food waste bins into the buildings here for students, and we found that the Faculty of Engineering and IT had terrible, terrible contamination rates, much more than any other area, and a couple of particular floors turned out to be the postgrad floors, which were very, very high proportion of Indian and sort of South Asian. And when they finally got, you know, talking to people, they come from places where they have a social class, where people of a social class who are actually resourced enough to be able to come to Australia, they don't deal with waste. They have servants to deal with waste. So by virtue of being who they are, they don't deal with waste. If they were to deal with waste, that would make them a servant. So when they come here, they're not interested in recycling. In fact, they can't, their self-identity won't let them take on that, because that would say to them that they're a servant. And so it's not like it's a massive cultural barrier. It's not just that they come from somewhere where recycling is not something they do, it's something they don't do. And so that was a real challenge. It's still a little bit of a challenge, but that was a real challenge to, you know, to embrace. And I guess that's one of the things when we talk about the diversity.
How did you overcome that? Or is it still ongoing?
It's still an ongoing. So part of it was to recognise that wasn't going to change slowly and to employ cleaners to help. And, you know, just to continue to say in Australia that's not what it means, and just to continue to engage. But particularly here, people are here for a year, you know, and then they go home. So the turnover every year, they've decided to take a structural approach more so, but trying to build off people's desire to conform and to fit in and say, well, in Australia, this is what we do and this is what it means, and here's your lecturers sorting their waste and, you know, those sorts of things. So trying to provide new social norms that people can, adapt to and say that might be what it means, you know, where you come from, but that's not what it means.
Some coaches, they from better waste management background than here. So they're struggling, like they're going back to 20, 30 years back. Because they are so surprised that everything goes in commingled bin. There's glass bin, there's aluminum can bin, they're all different. They are so shocked that everything goes in yellow bin. All coaches are different.
Yeah, that's right. And so that's one of the things where what they were saying is that we really need to identify each individual community that you want to engage with, and to understand what does recycling and waste mean in that community, what's the experience, what's the background, what are the meanings attached to it, and develop individual strategies. And so one of the things that I think we've heard about and is common is that they definitely want word of mouth, so face-to-face communications, and they want it to come through their own networks. So whether that's actually existing community groups, community leaders, but even just their own radio stations and things like that.
Those networks are great for older generation. You'll find that students, overseas students, they just use the internet and actually want to know what's happening in Australia. And so so within usually younger people like in the colleges here, they gain access to information different way, but they're just not getting information from council. Some of them actually have a higher desire to do the right thing. They want to know what social norm is. And in that case, you can actually push the behavior a bit more to say you're in Australia to learn, but you can also teach other people, so you can educate other people that in Australia we care about recycling. Yeah.
And I think that's interesting. So just the WSROC thing on the social media and the recent SSROC Recycling's campaign in the testing that they did for that paid Facebook promotion of videos to CALD communities, and particularly to young CALD communities, got the most shares of any of the sub-audience groups. That makes sense? So, they were targeting kind of like older people, younger people, CALD, all these different demographics, and it was young CALD who had the most shares. And then another UK case study that was just one of the biggest that we could find over in the UK, so increasing recycling by more than doubling it. Again, direct engagement, door knocking, going face-to-face with people that can speak the language. So what they actually did was they actually employed people from within the group, trained them as casually employed and trained them as waste educators to come and do it. And I guess that kind of tries to bridge that gap of having knowledge of the community and the culture, but also the knowledge of waste to do it, but to employ them casually rather than to rely on champions to informally reduce that. And then, so from all the work that we did, the main recommendations that was, and I think we've covered a lot of this, we've heard it, but to really understand each CALD community as distinct from the others, to understand the diversity that exists within those communities, because there is as much diversity within any one of those communities as there is within any other community. Again, language barriers can be a big problem. A lot of terms that we use in English don't even make sense to English speakers. I don't know if you find, but we find contamination means nothing to English speakers. But some terms don't translate appropriately into other languages, and so sometimes you need to find concepts rather than words, and so sometimes translations, like paid translations, still aren't that as well understood within the community, so having people from within the community to help with that, and really looking for those networks for newly arrived people. Who are they tapping into when they arrive, because they can be harder to find through your other channels. One of the things that we found is that people with the councils that we were working with that had high proportions of CALD communities within their population, their website was still pretty much an English speaking website that may have had links to a couple of fact sheets in particular languages, but you needed to be able to navigate to the page that had the fact sheets and then know that they were the fact sheets and have some reason for wanting to click on them to see what they were in. One of the interesting things that we found, which most councils apparently can't do because the wonderful IT systems that you guys have set up, but Shoalhaven, for example, actually has a Google Translate built into their website. So you come to the website and it actually just asks you which language do you want, and it translates the entire website into whatever language. So that Google facility is not available to most councils because of that we've worked with, because of just how things are set up. But that idea,
we have that function on ours.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's Google Translate, but there's about 70 languages at the bottom. You just click it.
Yeah.
I don't know how accurate it is.
So I've been on your website and I've seen all the languages on there. It's pretty cool.
Yeah,
so there's 70.
Yeah, that's pretty much practically any language I can think of.
But it's an automatic one.
Yeah, it's
not someone's translation.
Usually not very useful.
No
Better
idea
for
how
some
you-
languages than others.
Yeah, so Shoalhaven did some testing.
I've read some funny things.
But Shoalhaven got some people to actually come and test them and to read them with them and to talk about it. Like that. So, yeah, so that is things that we found.
All right. Thank you all very much. Do you have a question, Luke? All right, so we've got a bit of time now for some general discussion. Were there any big questions that people wanted to get out today that didn't get answered?
I think not necessarily a question, just a comment regarding engaging CALD communities, and I think maybe not in a small scale. A lot of our organisations might have been guilty of this. Is sort of having, say, for example, translating the flyers and stickers and things like that. Sort of having that as an afterthought. Maybe at the end of the day you discovered, oh, I think there's this community that's not effectively doing, you know, maybe they've been affected with noticing worse contaminations at certain areas as opposed to others. So now let's focus on that community. So I feel like we might have better engagement if we're considering CALD communities at the forefront with just like all communities that, you know, and then that way we might be able to just like, it's more, I guess it's a bit more inclusive that way, as opposed to doing it as an afterthought. Not that, you know, I guess to some degree everybody's been guilty of that to some, you know, to some element, but yeah, that's one way to increase engagement, I guess.
I just want to add to what ECC was saying about that they're great at communication, but you guys are also great at finding the groups in the first place. I think a lot of the CALD groups really value that face-to-face interaction. So if you just call and try and book a group and say, if you would you be interested in doing a recycling workshop, it can be a bit alien to them. But going out with the translator, perhaps meeting them and say, hey, I'm from council, I want to come and do a little game with your group, would you like to do that? That's a lot easier. You'd get a high success rate. And when you did a door knocking campaign, you weren't just handing out translated pamphlets. It was actually, hey, we had lots of pictures of different items. Which one do you think goes in the yellow bin? So yeah, so that's transcultural. People get to interact and oh, I learned something there. You know, someone actually came and did a little.
If you're lucky.
Activity, yeah. Yeah. So what?
Just a question for you, Jenny. So within the university and being that there's so many transient CALD communities, because I feel like even established CALD communities in a country like Australia have issues contacting those transient CALD communities that are related to their own community. So how does your university sort of try to tap into those individual communities?
I guess one of the things that makes this unique is that a lot of the places where they have very poor performance also happen to be at like a higher degree research where people like literally sleep under desks and things like that. Like people live, the visiting students often live part of their time in the student areas that they're inhabiting. So they're here. So they're here in the space. So it's a lot of actually talking to them while they're in the lectures, while they're in the spaces. It's a little bit easier because we can find them. You know they're in your community, but you don't know exactly where they are. So and this is all our sustainability team, so it's not ISF, but it's just conversations that we've had with UTS Green, but they do all their communications physically through the space here. Yeah, they don't try and, and also the student housing. But yes, within the spaces that we control.
Advantage, that's good.
Yeah, same goes with the English centres as well, like MTC and Navitas, because the students are there, so this will give you an access to it.
How do people choose the communities? So on a door knock, for example, if you've got people speaking languages, how do you choose those languages? And I asked that because we did a photo trial not long ago and we door knocked everybody who was going to be part of that trial, and I literally spoke to Arabic, Vietnamese, Tamil, probably a dozen languages down the streets that I door knock. So if you're going to do something like that, how do you decide?
Well, the council provided the wanted languages, and we paired with different language speaking people, and mostly one of them speak the same language.
The main ones.
Yeah.
Is that because they're multilingual? Or
Some are multi, some are bi.
But otherwise, we grab someone because we'll be all in the same area, so we'll just bring them and we'll be targeting one street one night, and so there'll be always someone speaking the language of the resident.
Oh, so you sort of know that the person that lives in this property speaks this language type of thing?
We can guess, yes, based on the information that council. Okay.
Anything else anyone wants to ask or raise? Anyone online?
Want to ask the material that you provided from Liverpool. How was that received by the group?
Well, because it was in their own language, we sort of put together some little sort of flyer packs and offered them. We took them around to each of them and asked if they wanted to take them, and pretty much everyone did. So yeah, and they were flicking through. So
okay, that's great.
All right. Okay, that's it for today. This is obviously a big topic that we'll be working on for years and years to come. Our next meeting is the 24th of January between 1 and 3, so that's a different time. Most likely at Canterbury Banks Town Council, providing our IT can make sure that the webinar will work, which they weren't able to do for this one, which is why we're here, rather than there. Do we have a topic for that one yet?
We don't, but the survey that the people who were here last month, survey, very loosely speaking, where you got to circle or comment on the things, not surprising to anyone in the room, the most important to everybody was contamination management. So the planning group discussed that we want to have a strong focus on that next year, and Gail, WMA's CEO, is really keen to support that. So just as another update, which actually I should have mentioned, so ACORD, Australian Council of Recyclers, has confirmed that EPA is going to fund their Project Yellow, which is their New South Wales, don't get your hopes up about what these words mean, but their New South Wales-wide recycling education campaign, which my understanding is going to be based around an app that you can use to scan items, so it will visually recognise items and tell you which bin based on your postcode, and will be they'll develop a series of resources which councils can take and brand. And so they'll be available. So ACOR is planning that, but WMA, politics, WMA is also trying to work out, so Gail is going to meet with me and then also with the planning group, hopefully, to talk about, what are the things that WMA can do to support the people here in terms of, gathering the best evidence on contamination, getting consistent messages, even just getting a consistent idea of what is and isn't contamination in different spaces. So that's a watch this space. There is also talk, and again, different channels, but one of the things that was interesting to people also was FOGO, and particularly with the AWT. So we were planning to have a quarterly event for this group in February, and WMA is now talking about a general event at the end of February on FOGO, so we'll probably look at aligning those. So that's what we know at this stage for next year, but we will be meeting to pick a particular topic for this meeting next week, and we'll send that out and get it into you. I think I've sent a save the date already, hopefully, to have it in your calendars, and then we'll send more details.
Cool. Fantastic. All right, well, thank you all very much. Thanks for coming, and we'll see you in January. Have a great Christmas. Thank you.
Look, I mean, this is
Mostly what you guys do.
Oh, right. Yeah. I would like to have done that in years myself.
My dad, that's how you know. Do you guys have any video online that is not the voice of the spell?
No, I just I never had it.
Now it's is Crystal still there? But most colleges these days, running workshop at colleges like by a couple of 11 councils, and the only place that